We're going to hear now from Vanessa Gordon, who's the Director of Place Excellence and Public Space at the Department of Planning, Industry and Environment. And Vanessa will deliver our opening address. So please put your hands together and welcome Vanessa to the stage.
Fantastic, thank you very much. And thank you, Uncle Ray, if you're still here, for that really lovely and warm welcome. And I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which we meet today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and their elders past, present and emerging. So my role today is really, I think, to set the scene and I hope a bit of the tone and the stage for the speakers that are coming up. This can't really be done without acknowledging that today builds on years of progress that everyone in this room has made and others that have come before us. And it's led to the really strong strategic platforms that we have today in policy. But of course, still work to do, new challenges to meet, and steps to be made in areas we may not have even considered 10, 20, 30 years ago. But I hope we can all come together to share the knowledge that we bring today, and it's an opportunity to add to each other's knowledge, and that sharing that passion that we have. People often approach planning with a very specific lens. It could be heritage, culture, environment, policy, and we're all fierce advocates, as we should be, for our space. But what I've seen the magic really happen is when we sit together and focus on those outcomes for place and people, and there's an appreciation of what each of us contributes to that. My focus today is on public space as a place, its impact on wellbeing, and the recent strategic policy platforms in place to support this. It's in the broader context of the Department of Planning, Industry and Environment, with a shift to a people-centred approach to place. We want to enable places that are authentic, where local character is valued. And we know to be able to do that, we need to engage everyone in the process. And a principles-based approach to planning. A move to strategic planning away from process to enable better decisions. Rather than being reactive, having early conversations about what people value. So I think the building blocks are in place, and it's a good time for us to come together. Hey, works. So in terms of public space, when we think of Sydney, for visitors and locals, we all know those places that come to mind. Opera House, the Harbour Bridge, the beaches. On a recent trip to Melbourne, it was the laneways. And these iconic destinations are important. They're Instagrammable, experiential, and they play a role in telling the story of the city and its people. But just as important are those everyday public spaces, the ones that work hard for us 365 days a year. It's where we walk our dogs, have our kids' birthdays, hang out and meet friends, take 10 minutes to breathe, where I read a book. I grew up in Blayney in Western New South Wales, and you think there would be oodles of public space. I don't know if anyone's here from that area. But for my family, the key public space was the main street. That's where we met our friends, our families, where we sat and where we gathered. It was a short main street. There was not a lot on there, but it's where we went. The UN definition of public space are places publicly owned or of public use, accessible and enjoyable by all for free and without a profit motive. And this allows us to access a really broad and rich international conversation on public space. Under this definition, the types of public space include streets, avenues, boulevards, pavements, and the work Lucy, our keynote speaker, has done in Healthy Streets kind of goes to the heart of place-based approaches for me and the importance of public life. She's got some great examples of where multiple disciplines have come together around a shared vision of wellbeing to create great places. It also includes public open spaces, parks, reserves, beaches, riverbanks, parks, waterfronts, and also public facilities, those libraries, community centres, museums and galleries that are free and publicly accessible. We can also look at public spaces through an infrastructure lens, green infrastructure, but also community and social infrastructure. And you could also look at it through a lens of ownership. They can be publicly owned or privately owned public space, affectionately known as POPs. Okay. So I think about public spaces as places. Place is a really interesting concept. It's a space with meaning, and it's been explored for a decade, since the 50s, 60s, 70s, and even earlier through human geography. And place is everywhere right now, but what does it mean? If I reflect on the evidence, that place is defined by its location, its physical attributes like its design, the trees, the paths, and then just as importantly, its public life. From these and its context around it comes its character. So it's important that we're not creating these non-places, these homogenous could be anywhere places. And the key to the meaning of public spaces is this public life. And from this comes the attachment people have because of its beauty or through how it's experienced. I find the idea of attachment really interesting. There was a lovely 3-year study in the US by the Knight Foundation called The Soul of the Community that found attachment in itself has real social, economic and health benefits. And attachment is most strongly associated where there's social offerings, openness, a sense of welcoming, physical beauty and green space. It's working. I only want to touch quickly on the benefits of public space. I think this room is full of experts in the benefits of public space. So I don't want to labour on, but just a few highlights. We know it contributes to our social identity, inclusion and cohesion. The World Health Organization recognises substantial evidence base to show that green and public space is good for us. It's associated with health benefits, both physical and mental, including reductions in illness and death. In other words, our open spaces and public spaces are powerful in the fight against obesity and ill health. I like Uncle Ray's yarns that he has, and my very personal story is when I came back from New Zealand 10 years ago with 2 young boys, we were just finding out about the real challenges of having a child with disabilities. I mean, every family with disabilities has their own journey and experience, but at that time, I had to allow so much more time and effort just to get out of the house, to get somewhere. Where we could go was really limited. But we found one park in our neighbourhood, and it was the only park for miles that was fenced, had clear sight lines, was safe, and more importantly, it was where my son could be out of a disability setting with other kids. I can't tell you the importance it was to our family in terms of isolation and social connection. So it really is the stage for these social connectors that can facilitate the creation of social capital and the scene of our public life. They encourage us to walk more, play sport, share an experience and learn our stories through museums and libraries. We know play is important to children's development. We know intuitively, and there's also increasing evidence, that just nature, being in nature, is good for our physical and mental health. So public spaces are the living rooms of a place. And more than the space between buildings, it's the coming together of the many pieces across our cities and towns, the combinations of the streets, parks, museums, libraries and plazas that we share. Now, I started my career in health promotion and community development. That feels like a long time ago. I won't tell you how long ago. And I worked through the multifaceted and layered approaches needed to support community behavioural change in breast screening, cervical screening, drug and alcohol. I get that it's complex, the life cycle is long, and attribution is really challenging. Planning is a powerful enabler, and I'm from the Department of Planning. Through built form, the types of uses allowed in these spaces, but I acknowledge it's not the only contributor. There are also services, programs, there's garden beds that need tending, there's programming that needs to be done, there's operational things to consider. So although planning is one of the contributors, we actually have a great opportunity now with the planning system reorientating to place and principles to highlight the importance of public space in creating livable communities and healthy communities. Quality. So successful public spaces, it's really about their quality and walkability that make the difference and come to mind. The quality of a public space is key to people being both active and connected. And I like to see quality through the lenses of the physical form, that design, maintenance, integration with the natural environment, but also the activities and the meaning that people associate with that space. The Project for Public Spaces, it's a well-known placemaking group, has worked internationally and reviewed thousands of public spaces. And the work they've done has concluded that for public spaces to be successful, they share a few key qualities. They're easily accessible, they have a mix of uses and activities, they're comfortable, and they are sociable places. Okay. My apologies, some of the slides have not agreed with me, so they're missing a few of the headings, but I'll talk through them. And we know that walkability is a central aspect of creating social capital and health. We want to make it easy for people to intuitively walk and cycle around their neighbourhood. A 20-minute walk built into a person's daily routine we know reduces the risk of early death and increases a person's mental health. So to improve opportunities to walk and cycle, places need to be safe, convenient and direct. But we know it's not the same across Sydney and rural areas. The Greater Sydney Commission Pulse of Greater Sydney report has found that walking trips are highest in the Eastern City District and lowest in the Western City District. And the percentage of residents with access to public space was within 5 minutes, around 5 minutes of 400 metres walk, was about 58% in the Western City District and 77% in the Eastern City District. We also recently gained some insights from the Greater Sydney Outdoors Study. We conducted the study to discover what people love to do during their recreation time. It's going to help us plan for a greater, more livable Sydney, and walking and socialising are pretty key and consistent in terms of people's feedback. We asked Sydneysiders what they like to do outdoors, what they value, and the results are online of over 7,000 respondents. We also have an incredibly strong policy platform that's being created through planning and design. In terms of planning, there's a new legislative framework for place and principles-based planning, and it's gaining momentum. In Sydney, this was done, and the stage was set by the Greater Sydney Commission's district plans. That has set the direction for local councils to deliver their local plans over for the next 20 years. And I know Rod Simpson's speaking about this later, so I'll let him go into detail with that. In terms of design, government architects have provided important thought leadership and policy in this space. They released Better Placed, a policy that recognises the design of our cities and towns impacts walkability and livability, and one of the key principles of this is around health and wellbeing. There's also a draft guide for regional New South Wales that they put on public exhibition. They're considering the feedback on that now. They also have a movement and place framework working with Transport for New South Wales that recognises our network of roads and streets are a major part of the systems of public spaces. And greener places that recognises green infrastructure is essential. So I think the foundation pieces are coming together in terms of design and planning policy. Which leads us to the Premier's priority as a very powerful policy lever for positive change. The establishment of a new Minister for Public Spaces recognises the value of green, open and public spaces to our community. And this was further supported by the announcement to increase the proportion of homes in urban areas within 10 minutes walk of quality green, open and public space by 10% by 2023. A new public spaces division has been established within the department to specifically lead this priority and more broadly bring focus to the commitment through mapping, analysing, benchmarking and embedding public space in planning, delivering and management across New South Wales. Some of the things that we're already doing: 150 million was announced for new and improved parklands across urban areas and will create a network of connected parks and open space. As part of this package, 50 million will be used to turn existing government-owned land into upgraded parks through Penrith, Ermington, Appin, Leamington and beyond. And a further 100 million is available to secure new parks to be developed across Sydney. Okay. There's also other programs in place which will see improvements to Western Sydney parklands, Mount Penang. There's 150 million to improve access to national parks. There's a fantastic new play space coming on and park in Gosford that was done with the local Aboriginal Land Council, and work being done in Jindabyne as well. Okay. There's this fantastic program, and if you're not aware of it, I really encourage you to go to the Everyone Can Play website and have a look. Everyone Can Play is a program that includes a best practice resource for councils, community leaders, landscape architects and passionate local residents. It's a reference guide for creating world-class play spaces. And the heart of Everyone Can Play is the declaration that play is for everyone, regardless of age, ability or cultural background. It follows 3 really simple principles. Can I get there? Can I play? And can I stay? And as part of this, we've been working with councils and across 34 projects and to launch new inclusive play spaces. And in the last few months, we've had them open in Waitara Park in Hornsby and Parsley Bay and Parramatta Park. And they're just delightful spaces. I encourage you to go and have a look. Okay. I think how long have I got? Okay. Great. Let's skip that. So with the policy platform that we have and with the Premier's priority and access and quality in mind, how are we going to achieve the Premier's priority? Well, not alone, definitely not alone. To have impact and also long-term to shift the dial to really positive outcomes, we need to work together with everyone in this room and beyond. We're thinking about public space, how do we create more space, better space and more activated space? and how can we all contribute to these outcomes. We're looking at changes in the system, we're looking at targeting interventions with local councils, and how do we collaborate with the community and local citizens. I think engaging our citizens is absolutely paramount, and this is at all levels. Can we also use different models to help support this through audience development in our museums, customer experience mapping, behavioural insights, and really using the data well that we have? Okay. I think the challenges are also our opportunities for innovation and different thinking. How do we successfully put a place-based, principle-based planning system into New South Wales? How do we support diverse communities in sometimes complicated networks? How do we genuinely engage the community? How do we take the lead from First People and how they would like their knowledge and voices to be included? How do we build an appreciation of each other's expertise and knowledge and break down those barriers to focus on community good and community outcomes? So I think the key to our success will be collaboration, and I know it's challenging. It's early, but for the Premier's priority, it's very early days, and this is really an invitation from me to everyone in the room in terms of your ideas, your thoughts of over the next 3 to 4 years, how we can work together to achieve the Premier's priority. So thank you very much.